Hi Year 11, I'm going to do a sort of walk and talk mock / explanation of language paper 2 for you. So as you know, when you get back after half term, you will do two mock exams. Your language mock will be paper 2, which I'm going to talk about today. And then in a separate video, I'm going to go through literature paper 1, which is the other mock you will be doing. So language paper 2, we like to essentially call the non-fiction paper, whereas paper 1 is the fiction paper. Now you have 2 hours to answer the whole paper. Within that, we have a reading section, which is 1 hour, and you then have a writing section, which is 1 hour divided into 2 30-minute questions. So we're going to go through the reading exam and we're going to go through then the writing section as well. Now, unlike paper 1, you will have 2 different texts that you will have to write about. One of them will be from the 21st century, so it will be modern. And the second one will be from the 19th century, so a similar sort of time to A Christmas Carol. Typically, question 1 and 2 tend to be about the 21st century article, which tends to be in a separate resource booklet. Then 3 and 4 tend to be on the 19th century article, which is always in the sort of exam booklet. And then question 5 and 6 get you to write about both. So we're going to go through one section at a time. One of the key things to get right in this exam is the timings. Now, if we've got 1 hour, we've got to divide our time up sensibly. Now, think of this exam as having 3 sections. We have question 1 and 2 is our section 1. And we're going to spend 20 minutes on that. We then have questions 3 and 4. And we're going to spend 20 minutes on that. And then finally, we have question 5 and 6. And we're going to spend 20 minutes on that. So we're dividing our time up into 3 20-minute sections. So let's look at 1 and 2 then. Now, question 1 and 2, it will tell you specifically, read the newspaper article, Nick Wallender Makes History at Niagara Falls, in the separate resource material. So there will be a separate booklet on your desk, along with the booklet with the exam paper in, and you have to go to that resource material to find it. And I can tell that I'm writing about the right text. Nick Wallender Makes History at Niagara Falls. Nick Wallender Makes History at Niagara Falls. It is always worth spending 30 seconds double checking that you are writing about the right text. I've had, sensible, clever students slip up doing that and they realise halfway through. And that's always obviously quite a big mistake. So just double check you're writing about the right text. It does tell you very, very clearly what to do. So you will notice that we have question 1, which is only actually worth 3 marks, and then question 2, that is worth 10 marks. We like to call this a short answer question and then a long answer question. And the way we answer short answer questions is different to how we answer long answer questions. Now, short answer questions should be written like a list question on paper 1. However, rather than listing 5 things you learn about a character, which is the sort of question we see on paper 1, this is actually asking you 3 1-mark questions. But we simply have to just list or write down the correct answer. So, when I read a question, I always want to have my highlighter and I want to make sure I'm highlighting the key words. So, how far above the water was Nick Wallender when he made his tightrope walk? So I am looking for how far above he was the water when he was walking across the tightrope. Name one thing that made it difficult for spectators in Canada to see Walenda making his crossing. So I've also got to look out for one thing that made it hard for people watching to actually see this guy cross Niagara Falls. And then C, give the name of one of the spectators who watched Nick Walenda. So I can see here that I'm actually being asked to find 3 explicit pieces of information. Now, an explicit piece of information is a piece of information you're directly told. For example, Jane had brown hair. I'm explicitly told it. So if my question was, what colour hair does Jane have? In my text it would say, Jane has brown hair. So that's explicit. Mostly, these types of short questions are asking you to find explicit information. However, it is occasionally implicit, which is naturally a little bit more difficult because it's less obvious. That's because implicit information is information that is implied through the words used. You have to look at the effect of the words, read between the lines to get that same meaning. For example, Jane went bright red as she walked into the classroom. Well, what's that telling me then? Well, I can infer maybe she's embarrassed because a person tends to go red when they're embarrassed. So it doesn't say Jane was embarrassed when she walked in the classroom. That would be explicit. But saying Jane's face was red as she walked in the classroom is implying embarrassment. So it's normally going to be explicit information. It should be quite obvious, but we need to be careful just in case it is implicit. Now, I also need to look at question 2 because I need to answer questions 1 and 2 together. And I'll explain why in a moment. So I've clearly got an idea now of what I'm looking for question 1. Now I'm going to do the same for question 2. How does the writer try to show that Nick Walenda's tightrope walk was astonishing and dramatic? So as I'm looking for how far above the water he was, one thing that made it difficult for people to see, and the name of one of the spectators, I'm also going to be highlighting anything that shows his tightrope walk as astonishing and dramatic. That's because I only want to read this text once. I don't want to read it, answer question 1, read it again, answer question 2, because for a lot of you, the reading is going to take you a bit of time. And if you've only got 20 minutes, you do not want to be spending over half that time reading. That's daft, because then you don't get a chance to actually write enough. So I'm going to make it really clear what information I'm looking for. I'm going to read the text once, and as I read, I'm going to find information for A, B and C, and I'm also going to find any evidence I can use for question 2. So, how do I write this down then? Now, question 1, I'm simply listing the correct answer. Okay, so that's all I have to do. I literally have to list the correct answer. Now, I'm just going to make up the answers here because for time's sake, I'm not going to actually model all of the answers. But let's say how far above the water Nick Walenda was when he made his tightrope walk. Let's say it's, I don't know, 500 metres. I literally just have to write what the answer is. Be careful, if it needs some sort of measurement, you must make sure you put down that measurement. So if I just did 500, that wouldn't get me a mark. It needs to be the metres, the measurement. Name one thing that made it difficult for spectators in Canada to see. Again, I'm just making this up, but let's say for argument's sake, the text tells me it's the fog. I only have to write the fog. I do not have to write it in a full sentence. I do not have to do a mini PEE. Give the name of one of the spectators who watched Nick Walenda. Again, I'm going to make this up. Tom Brown. And that's it. That's how I answer question 1. And it should be quick. Now, question 2 then is a 10-mark question. And this is going to require me to write in those mini PEE sentences that we've learned so much about. In a 10-mark question, I want to try to be aiming for 4 to 5 mini PEEs as a minimum. 5 is safer. If you can push beyond 5, excellent. We don't do 5 and then go, oh, I'm done, I'm going to have a little chill. That's stupid. If you've got more time, write more than 5. It will get you more marks. More marks mean a higher grade. But we're looking at 4 to 5 minimum. Now, I know that we have taught you a really specific writing frame. And as basic as it sounds writing them and feels, we need to follow our advice. So, my writing frame is going to be, when we are told, quote whatever my quotation is, it shows, it was astonishing or dramatic because. Now, obviously, I'm going to do astonishing or dramatic depending on what my quote is. Now, just like your English teachers and hopefully your parents bang on at you about the importance of reading, reading is important because it teaches us words, teaches us vocabulary. Some of you might sit there and go, I don't know what astonishing means, but I do know what dramatic means. In that case, just ignore that and just use the word dramatic. But astonishing does mean sort of you're shocked. It's like a shocked amazement, okay? So when I get to writing question 2, I need to write in these mini PEE writing frames. Now, if you think writing yourself out a little writing frame will help you, do it. It will probably take you 30 seconds. There's nothing wrong with doing what I've just done. Because actually all you then need to do is go to your text. Obviously, I haven't actually selected any evidence yet, but let's imagine that I have, there we go, ran the last few steps. Let's imagine this is my quotation and I've got lots more highlighted. I need to go through and I need to pick my evidence. So we're going to imagine for a minute I've got lots highlighted. Let's say this is going to be my first quote. So I would simply go to my page and I would say, when we are told, he ran the last few steps, it presents his walk as astonishing because he was so skilled he could run across the narrow tightrope without falling. Don't know about you, but I probably would have been face first in that ravine or river. I couldn't do that, yeah? So it makes it astonishing. There we go, there's 1 mark. I've got to do 3 or 4 more of those. So once I've selected my evidence, and I like to number my quotes, it keeps me on track, I simply have to just use my writing frame and I need to try and write as many of these as I can, okay? So question 3 and 4 then, very similar approach, so I'm not going to repeat myself too much. We've got a short answer question, another A, B and C. It's going to be asking us to find explicit, potentially implicit information and literally just write that information down. And then I've got a long answer question. And I know, again, I want 4 to 5 mini PEEs as a minimum. Now, question 1 is pretty straightforward, question 3 is pretty straightforward, just like question 1. To answer the following questions, you must read the extract by George Banks on the opposite page. Now this one's normally quite easy because it's always literally on the back. But if I wanted to double check, blah, 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 there we go, George Banks. So that shows me that I'm definitely writing about the right one. So, give one detail from the text that suggests Niagara Falls is very impressive. What was the size of the crowd that watched him walk across Niagara Falls? How long did his whole performance last? So again, I've literally got to do 3A, B, C, and just like question 1, I'm literally just writing down those brief answers. I'm not writing in full sentences. I'm not writing in mini PEE. Now question 4, again, it's a long answer question. It's a 10 marker. We've got to be writing in our mini PEEs. Now, question 4 is usually a little bit different. Sorry, the photocopy has gone a bit weird here. Question 4 is often evaluative. Just like question 5 on paper 1. You have to give your opinion. For example, in this extract, George Banks, he's the writer, presents Blondin, the tightrope walker, in a very positive way. How far do you agree with this view? So it's just like question 5 on paper 1. There is a statement and you have to say whether you agree or disagree. Now, for these types of questions, the answer's normally pretty obvious that it's agree or disagree. It's typically agree. Tightrope walkers tend to be pretty impressive individuals. But I'm looking for evidence of him presenting him in a positive way or a negative way. My little mini PE, and I've run out of space here, so I'm going to write it on my sheet of paper. My mini PE sentence frame here is probably going to be either I agree or I disagree with the statement because when we are told, I'm going to put my evidence, it presents Blondin positively or doesn't present him positively because. Obviously, what one I do is going to depend on whether my quote is showing him in a positive way or a negative way. So it's really exactly the same as question 2. The difference is I have to start my mini PEEs with either I agree or I disagree. And in my explanation, I need to make sure I'm explaining how the words make me agree or how the words make me disagree. So again, once I'm really clear on what information I'm looking for, I would read through the text. I'm looking for my answers, highlighting my answers for question 3. I'm highlighting my answers for question 4, anything that's showing Blondin as positive or negative. Then I'm going to my paper, quickly jotting down the answers to question 3. And then I'm using either my mental mini PE writing frame or one I've bothered to write out for myself. And I'm going to try and do my 4 or 5 quotations. Again, showing that I might be able to push on beyond 5 if I can. So far, it's pretty straightforward and it's pretty similar to what we've done on question 1. Question 5 and 6 is where it gets a little bit different. To answer the following questions, you must use both texts. So here is where we are expected to find information now the same information from both texts together. And this does require more of us. Okay, it is more challenging. It's what makes this paper a bit trickier, really, than paper 1. Now, again, we notice that we have a short question and a long question. However, this short question is a bit different. It is a summary question, and we don't get these any other place on this paper. So, using information from both texts, explain briefly in your own words how the spectators reacted to Blondin and Wallenda. People always overcomplicate this question. It is literally asking you to pick a specific piece of information. How did the spectators react in one article, and how did the spectators react in the other article? Now, in an ideal world, you'll just remember this because you've literally just read them. But you might find you have to skim read back through to try and find that information, because that information is only going to appear in one place. Again, I don't really have time to read through all the text, so I'm just going to give you a hypothetical example, okay, about what this might look like. So let's say I found that information. I've now got to answer question 5. Now, I know I don't have to PE because it's told me I've got to explain it briefly in my own words, but I also need to do more than just list it. So here's what we recommend. You simply write one sentence for text 1 and you write one sentence for text 2. For example, in Burnett's article, so I've just picked the first one, it doesn't matter what order I do it in. It shows the spectators react by cheering loudly and taking photos. In, just checking his name, Banks's article, it shows the spectators also cheering, but some being so shocked they fainted. So this would get me 4 marks because I've got 1, 2 from there and I've got 1, 2 from there. So I'm literally just doing a summary sentence for each text, ideally trying to pick 2 pieces of information. But if you can only find 1 piece of information, please don't worry too much. Okay, so just try and find at least 1 piece of information from each text about the specific thing that question 5 is asking you to do. Okay, so question 6 then. Both of these texts are about tightrope walkers crossing Niagara Falls. They always give you a little bit of a reminder, and remember, both texts will always be about the same topic. Compare what Blondin and Nick Wallenda did during their crossings of Niagara Falls, how the writers try to convey the dangers of crossing. So, comparing means similarities and differences. This first bullet point tells me what evidence to find. So I am finding evidence from both texts about what these two tightrope walkers did during their crossings. Bullet point 2 tells me what to explain after my because. Now we know every good mini PE has a because in. Bullet point 1's telling me what evidence I'm finding. Bullet point 2 is telling me what I'm explaining. So I'm finding some evidence and I'm explaining how that evidence conveys, shows the dangers of crossing Niagara Falls. But I've also got to state whether they're showing a similar danger or whether it's showing a different danger. So I've got quite a lot of things that need to happen here. So step 1, I need to skim read both texts and I need to find evidence of what they did. Step 2, I need to look at that evidence and I need to think, is this evidence showing me that they did similar things that showed a similar danger? Or is this evidence showing me they did a different thing that showed different danger? So I have to do a little bit of a review of the evidence I found. Then I need to try and pair up my quotations and think, are these quotations showing something similar they did? Are these quotations showing something different they did? Now, ideally, I want 2 to 3 pairs of quotations. That means I need to find 2 to 3 pairs, 2 to 3 pieces of evidence from each text. Those of you aiming at the tippy top grades might find you can push to 4, maybe. That's up to you. So step 1, find my evidence of what bullet point 1's telling me. Step 2, review that evidence. Are they showing me a similar thing? Are they showing me a different thing? Step 3, pair up my quotes, and I should have a minimum of 2 pairs, maybe 3. Then I need to start writing. Now, largely how I write this is going to look quite similar to how I write a regular PE. It doesn't matter with which text you start, you just start and pick with one. So, in Burnett's article, when we are told they did whatever, it conveys the danger of crossing because, and then I've got my explanation. Notice I've used the language of that second bullet point, and I really, really recommend you do that to make sure you are actually hitting that second bullet point, because lots of students forget. So if I've got that in my mini PE, I know I'm going to answer that question. So far so good. It looks exactly the same to how we've answered question 2 and how we've answered question 4. Now the only real difference is now I have to write about the second text, and I'm always going to start with one of the two. Either similarly, if it's a similarity, or in contrast to this, if it's a difference. In, just double checking his name, Banks's article, when we are told they did it conveys the danger of crossing because, and then I'm done. And each of those would be a mark. So there's 2 marks, which is why I want to do at least 1 more set of those. So I've just got to remember, I start my second mini PEE with similarly, if it's a similarity, or in contrast to this, if it's a difference. And obviously in my explanation, I'm going to sort of want to be doing a little bit of comparison, showing how it's similar or how it's different. Now, people always go to me, Miss, what if I run out of time and I only do, say I do another 2 of those, but I stop here? How does that work? Now, the answer to that is it's a bit of a grey area. You know, an examiner will review your whole answer and decide if maybe you're going to go with 5 marks rather than 4. But typically we want to try to write about them in pairs. Okay? So that brings us to the end of talking about paper 2 reading. The next video is going to talk you through how to approach the transactional writing section.